So thank you so much all for joining us today in How to Be a Leader, Not a Boss. So looking forward to sharing this with you. And also, I'll be asking for your engagement throughout. Also, speaking of our super producer, Mel will be coming on a little bit later to do something that we like to call empathy theater. So we'll be having a little bit of dinner theater, talking about the topic of empathy. But what brings you here and how we're going to spend the next 15 minutes together, and we'll have some time for questions at the end, is we've gone through a lot of change. We're still going through an enormous amount of change. And one of the things that keeps coming up is managers and organizations and how they could support the culture moving forward. So learning how to support, how to motivate, how to delegate, how to build effective teams and direct reports is so challenging now, even more so with a hybrid environment. Again, dealing with change, that people do want to go back to work, people don't want to go back to work, but most importantly, that there's an opportunity here for a manager to have an impact on the people, on the teams, on the organization. And how do you do that at the same time while balancing your own responsibilities and your own expectations? So this webinar, I'm going to be focusing on the skills and the mindset for leadership, and show you basically how to confidently manage your time, your tasks, and your teams. Let's just go through some of the technical things here, which is obviously we're going to be using our chat. So as we saw, Mel is introduced herself. She is here to help you with any technical support, and she will also be helping you if there's any questions. We will have time for questions at the end, but I'll also be asking you to use the chat because we'll be doing some interactive activities throughout the webinar as well, and get your thoughts and opinions as we move forward. If you haven't taken a webinar with us before, or you're not familiar with us, we are the Great Canadian Training and Consulting Company. As you can see, we've been around for well over 20 years. And we've worked with over 20,000 individuals, and we do always live and instructor training. So there's no videos, it's always instructor-led training, everything from software and the soft skills that we do that. We've also got private and public classes as well. So we'll go through that at the end, and we can see the schedule that there's public classes, and those public classes are always guaranteed to run, which is a great feature. So no matter how many people register, you can count on that class will be running. And a little bit more is, when you want to sign up for training, it really starts with that first impression, and you're dealing with people. So it's fast quality customer service when you're doing this. So questions can be answered, guidance can be given as to which course would be the right training or which path you need to take. And also it's that 24/7 after support as well that goes through. And on the professional skill side, we've also got coaching available, group coaching and one-on-one coaching. So it is always a personalized experience that we want you to feel with Great Canadian Training. Our motto is guiding you to greater success. And that's what we'd like to believe happens in our software and our soft skills training. And that's where my role comes in. I am the Senior Professional Skills Facilitator and Coach here at the Great Canadian Training. And so, yes, as you can see here by my bio, I started as a professional actor many, many years ago, but then moved into the corporate world. And this leads into a little bit about the webinar today, which is communication skills and how to inspire and how to motivate others to create collaboration, but also at the same time, how to be able to coach and support people to be able to accomplish what they want to do. Let's talk a little bit about now our outcome for today, or what's going to be covered. So we're going to look at the overview of leadership, and we're going to be using a framework that we like to call LEAD. And so we're going to be talking about how to lead teams, how to lead your own tasks, how to lead individuals, also how to give feedback, which ties into the growth. Also talking about the needs of the people that are under you and how to be able to do that, and also your leadership styles and communication. That's why we're going to have Mel come on at the end and do empathy theater before we end this webinar. So as we get into this, some interest, I was just as I was getting ready for this webinar, just looking at some of the interesting data that was coming across my way. It's interesting, of course, how when you start working on something, I guess our technology is listening to us and starts giving you suggestions. And some interesting research came up. One of them was really interesting, was that new data suggests that for almost 70% of the people, their manager has more impact on their mental health than their doctor or their therapist or even the partner. 70%. What that means is that the people that you are managing, if you're a manager, you're having a lasting impact, that it doesn't fit into that 9 to 5 frame. And that's one of the things about being a leader, not a boss, is that it's not necessarily what you do or how you do it. It's what you do and how you do and how that makes the other person feel. How do they feel when they are in your presence? Because it's an everlasting process. Think about it. Everything that you say or do, if you want to think about it from a way that if you were posting it on social media, it's the same thing. It has a lasting effect. It's there. You can't take it back. We saw it. It happened. We witnessed it. And so that's one of the things that happens, is that it's not just in that 9 to 5 frame, but your people, your teams are thinking about things that was said or done during that time frame, and it continues to linger. Another thing that was also interesting, another data came up, was Gallup found that in people who were voluntarily doing exit interviews, that 50%, over 50%, like 52% approximately, of those exiting employees said that their manager could have prevented them from leaving. 52%. So 1 in 2 said that their manager could have prevented them from leaving. So this is the impact that one has as a manager, and why it's important to be a leader and not a boss. And boss meaning that you're often going to be very task focused. And I'll share some examples about that in a bit. But one of the things that they said was that if their leader, if their manager had checked in with them, checked in about how they were feeling, talked about their growth, gave them a sense of purpose, and were interested in their growth and interested in the sense of purpose and interested in them as human beings, all those things could have prevented them leaving. So often, we don't often hear about it till afterwards, till they've exited. So some interesting statistics as we go through this, because this is one of the things why we see a lot of people have become managers, because of their aptitude and technical skills or their intelligence. But one of the things that's so important about leadership is to bring the emotional intelligence into this play. Now, we're not going to be speaking about emotional intelligence. We have a whole webinar about that, and we have a whole course around emotional intelligence. But everything we're going to be discussing today has those elements of that. All right, let's go to our first survey right here. It's not a poll. I'm going to be asking you some questions and get you to put into the chat A, B, C, D, or E. So what makes a leader? Get ready to type into the chat A, B, C, D, or E. So A, they like to be right. B, they're very task focused. C, they take responsibility. They'll take ownership, in other words. They're a natural. Oh, they must have been born that way. Or is it their adaptability? And you could be more than 1 or 2. So put in the chat, what do you think makes a leader? Is it A, B, C, D, or E? And again, you could put more than 1. So Leslie, thank you. You're already our first person in there. And so I'll wait for a few more to come in, and then we'll take a look at some of the answers here. Well, we're definitely getting a lot towards the taking responsibility and the adaptability. I think Jody, you're saying that, and Leslie, you're going with likes to be right and adaptability. Okay, great. And this is the thing, we're just oh, Leslie, not A. Okay, change that. Very good. All right. Julie, task focus, takes responsibility, adaptability. Leslie, thank you. I see that you changed that. Got that. Jody says B and and task focused. All right, so we're getting some mixed opinions, but I think everybody seems definitely to agree that taking responsibility is an important one, and taking that ownership. And that's really, I think I definitely can agree with that about taking leadership, that is such an important part of that, is that taking leadership. That adaptability is also really important. It's kind of the opposite of likes to be right, which is, again, kind of the idea of being very task focused, which is you're very driven, but have sort of a narrow path. And adaptability and ownership, or taking responsibility, is this idea that you are open, that you see the big ideas first before you narrow it down. So thinking of the idea of like a funnel, like you start big and then you're able to narrow that down. And I like that a lot. Not a lot of you said that they were natural, because this is an ongoing skill. So what often got people into a management role is that they were very good at their job. And now it's going from managing data or managing tasks to managing people. So let me share with you my anecdote around, and it's a simple anecdote, but there's a lot of layers to this that we'll bring about as we go through. And this is, did you offer the matching handbag? And that was the turning point. This was my first experience in being trained to be a manager. And did you offer the matching handbag was, like I said, the turning point in where I said, so this is not right. So I've just graduated from university, and I see that there's an opportunity to be a manager in Vancouver, but being trained locally in the city, and then they'll pay for the cost to do there. And that worked out great for me, because there I was with my degree in theater, and my goal was to get to Vancouver, where there was a lot of filming going on. But this was a great opportunity to learn some other skills as well, specifically management skills and sales training and customer service training, because the position was for a shoe store. Now, it was a shoe store for an older clientele, so definitely a lot to learn there. Now, what turned around for me was, from the very beginning, was meeting the manager who was going to be training me to be the manager to open the new store in on the Pacific in Vancouver. Was that manager was very task focused. They didn't take any interest in me. They didn't take any interest in the role. They didn't give me any orientation about management training, sales training, customer service training. It was just continuously giving me task to do. When I was finally allowed to go onto the sales floor and do a sale, and when I got that first sale, I was so excited, ring the bell. I got that first sale. And I was expecting my manager to acknowledge that, to celebrate that. And the first thing they said was, "Did you offer the matching handbag?" And of course, I was disappointed that nothing was acknowledged. And the next thing that happened for me was I was thinking about my grandmother and going, "Oh my goodness, I would not be pushing a product like this. What kind of organization is this pushing product like this on this clientele?" And so that night I actually was speaking with my grandmother, and she was asking how the job went. And I said, "Well, I quit because they said, 'Did you offer the matching handbag?'" And she said, "Oh, I love it when they offer the matching handbag." And so why I share this story with you is a few things. One is, had the manager explained to me that it's a service that they offer about offering the matching handbag. It's not pushing a product, that mindset. If they had shown some curiosity about me, shown some interest in me as a human being, explained a bit more about the sense of purpose in what we're doing, and given me some skills and tools, all that could have gone completely different. So we'll come back to this anecdote and bring about, but let's get into the framework now about leading. And so this is our idea here, is that in leadership, it is about setting the tone. So if you want, it's the mindset and how we go through that. And we're going to talk about also about the leadership styles that you might fall into and what's involved in that, the formula. And then how to be effective. How do you balance your tasks and your teams and your individuals? That's a lot to do. And then how do you motivate that team to have a sense of purpose and aim towards goals? And then how do you develop them? How do you grow them? How do you motivate? So that's our basis for this. And this is also from our course that we do about how to be a leader, not a boss, managing in the modern workplace. And so let's define leadership. And the idea here really is that we want to encourage collaboration. There's two major dimensions to leadership. And that's, as I said, it's how do you achieve getting the, when to focus on the work and when to focus on the task, and then when to focus on the team and the individual. So it's that balance of, I've got numbers to hit. And at the same time, I've got people that I need to motivate. So how do you keep up that balance? Let's take a look and see how we'll do this together. Now, some of the key leadership characteristics. Number one, business aptitude. Now, you may have had a manager like that was really knowledgeable, had that great business aptitude. And that was probably that manager at that shoe store. They've been doing it for a long time. They understood the business. They had that business aptitude. What was missing is this idea of flexibility. And a lot of you said that was a key thing about leader, was that adaptability. The idea of empathy, and we're going to talk about that later in this webinar, because recognizing that people have emotions first and then logic afterwards, that we make our decisions first emotionally, and then we use logic to substantiate it. So when I heard, did you offer the matching handbag? That was maybe the logic, but I didn't hear the emotion that was involved. And of course, it created an emotion for me because I was thinking about my grandmother. And then trustworthiness. If you are not, and we're going to talk about that because trustworthy is so important. If you don't have trust, it's very difficult to motivate others if the trust is not there, because it's not what you say, but why are you saying it that makes people defensive. Emotional intelligence, and as I said, it's sprinkled throughout here today. We've got a whole course on that and a whole webinar on emotional intelligence because that is chock full. Clarity. How you communicate as a leader, that you may have a vision and you may have a sense of purpose, but how do you explain it to bring others involved? So it's not just in your head, to be able to communicate that clearly, but also for yourself to be very organized, that you're not so wrapped up in your tasks, that you have clarity as to what you're looking to accomplish. And then coaching and feedback. And we're going to talk about feedback today as well in this webinar, because that's so important to grow and motivate your people. So here we go. Those are some of the key leadership characteristics. Now let's talk about leadership styles. And so our first one is what we call the director. And the director was definitely our shoe store manager there, which is micromanaging, regular guidance, but there is a positive to this. The director is that sometimes you need to be able to tell people exactly what to do and to give them direction as to where they need to go and what do they need to do. So it's not to say that there's all of these in themselves are bad or good. There's a balance of everything in all of these categories. The next one is the supporter. And we could think of this one as the sort of the rah person, the person who's like, oh, way to go. That's just amazing. That's fantastic. And we all want a supporter in our camp. The challenge with a supporter, and I could think of an example of this, was I had a manager and who was watching me deliver a training. And to be honest, the training wasn't going very well. I didn't quite feel right. It was missing something, that people were not quite as engaged as I would like to have gone. And my manager was watching this training. And afterwards I said, look, I'm open to some feedback. Honestly, it didn't quite feel like it was the people were engaged as we would have liked for them to be. Do you have any thoughts? And they just said, oh no, you were really good. I could see, and they give an example when this happened, they were engaged. So that's what I call the supporter, which is you are supportive, but you're never giving any constructive or feedback that can help support the growth. It's just constantly supportive feedback. Then there's the coach, and the coach is obviously is really good. This is about where there's an opportunity to help grow and to motivate and giving constant feedback and collaboration. And the challenge with the coach is that sometimes the coach asks too many questions, and sometimes they just need to tell you. So how many times have we had a manager that's, what do you think, or how would you do this differently? And what at that point you want to just say, look, why don't you just tell me what it is I could have done better? I can't quite figure it out, or I feel like I'm being interrogated. So that's sometimes the downfall with the coach. And then our last one is the delegator. And the delegator is continuously giving out the tasks, but not necessarily the understanding behind the task. So, and you're also wondering, what are they doing? But at the same time, the positive of the delegator is they recognize there's opportunities for people to take on roles and responsibilities. So what is the right formula for all this? It's actually the balance of all four of them, which is direction and support. Now, direction means to be able to provide the information about the task, to assign the responsibilities, to deadlines, instructions, etc. So the directing is more that combination of being directive and to be able to delegate. And then the support is that combination of the coach and the supporter. So they can encourage, they can express confidence, but they can also coach in being able to deal with conflict within the group, and to also maintain that positive spirit, but also to coach to help be on how they can help grow these people. So it is a combination of being directive and supportive, directive and delegating, supportive and coaching. And this all ties into the fact that everybody on your team, if you're a manager, if you're a leader, has different needs. And our fundamental needs, obviously, in life is we need water, we need oxygen. But if we look at our fundamental needs at work, our individuals, our sense of purpose, what brings us to work every day, why do we get up and we can continue to work, is because we have needs that we need to get resolved and accomplished. And so if we look at some of them here, it's protection, which is the idea of that person just needs safety and stability, or the idea of affection. They need consistent appreciation or empathy, or the need could be of understanding, of knowledge and learning, or participation, cooperation, inclusion. And it could be a balance of this. It doesn't mean that one person is like continuously needing affection and empathy, but that they need affection and they need understanding, so they could be driven by, they need that appreciation to feel that they are moving forward, that they are accomplishing things, that they know that they are, what they're doing is that they're on the right path. And they also need that understanding. They need that because they're looking for achievement and they're looking for that knowledge. They're looking for that learning. And there could also be the idea of creation. So you're looking for growth, stimulation, a sense of purpose, identity, again, that meaning or that purpose, and that freedom, that autonomy or that choice. And some of these, as you're seeing them, could be about how do you want to communicate with your teams, with your individuals, if you are in that hybrid environment. You know, a lot of people, for them, that idea of freedom, autonomy, choice is becoming now a fundamental need, as that they want to work from home. They like the autonomy that this gives them. Gives them this choice. It helps bring them their meaning of their purpose, their identity. And then we need to be able to show that there's, an appreciation for that. And then some people may want to work in the office because they need that idea of creation. And then how can we create that, whether it be a hybrid environment or work from home environment or working from the office. So these, as we look at some of these, are some of the ideas of some of the needs that you can do. We will have a handout for you if you're attending this webinar. So you'll be able to also see this video again on YouTube, which will be posted shortly after the webinar has been done. And you'll also receive a handout with some of these things. But I also encourage you, if you want, to take a screenshot of this. Trust, as I said, is so important. So we could look back at these needs and be recognizing that. But if we don't have trust, it's very difficult to be able to get there. And we're going to do a little Venn diagram here with the trust. And that's the idea that we've got authority, presence, and our impact. Now, the authority, it kind of goes back to that business aptitude. It means demonstrating legitimacy, tongue twister. Most importantly with that, how you demonstrate it, how you communicate it in a skillful way. So that's, again, going back to that Schuster manager, they may have had the authority, but they were acting like a boss where it was just continuously task focused. And the authority is that balance of being supportive and directive, in that you've got the knowledge and it's how you share that with that person that makes them feel safe, the idea of trust. And then presence. Well, presence is so hard now because not only are we multitasking with all the different screens, but we're multitasking in our brains. Our attention span is less than a goldfish and has been decreasing since the 2000s, even more so after the pandemic, where we really got used to using different screens. So we're continuously multitasking in our heads. So that importance of being fully present in the here and now to build a strong connection. This is probably, I think, one of the most important parts of being a leader, not a boss, is to be fully present. Even before the pandemic, how many times would I walk in and speak with a manager when we were working in an office, and they would be on their laptop, and I'd sort of be in the doorway, and they'd be on their laptop, and they'd be like, yeah, and I'd be sharing something, and they would be like, yeah, and they'd be multitasking. Huge difference if they had stopped what they were doing, made eye contact with me, and I would have felt more invited in. And I would have known, again, back to the trust, that they were being fully present. So I obviously don't feel safe. And I'm sure you've all been in a situation where you walked in someone's office and they're doing that. The other thing about being present in this world of working remotely and hybrid is through our messaging that we're going through, emails and Teams and WebEx, however you're messaging with back and forth, is when what you say as a manager, when someone has said something or shared something with you, shows that you are fully present. Also shows if you have been multitasking, because you as a manager maybe didn't read fully what was written. And if you didn't read fully what was written, well, then you're signaling to your team member, to your individual, that you're not being fully present. And that's the impact that you have. And that's exactly what that is that you're able to have a shift in people's thinkings and feelings and behaviors, because how you communicate your authority, how you are being fully present. That's the impact, which goes back again to that data that we saw, that 70% of the people feel that their manager has more impact on their mental health than their therapist or doctor or even a partner. Because again, it's the lasting impression that you do. Let's talk a little bit more about trust. Now, trust is produced in a climate that includes honesty, openness, consistency. This is the thing. You can't turn it on, turn it off. You have to be intentional and be aware that this is, as you want to set the tone, that consistency is really important with the idea of trust. And what happens, again, going back to the impact, what happens when teams start to trust each other? Well, they can focus on the issue at hand. They are more likely to take risks, and they can devote their energies to problem solving and experience a greater level of synergy. So when there is trust, or if you want psychological safety, people feel that they can make mistakes, that they can fail, but they also feel motivated to want to do well for the team, for you as the manager, for the organization. Because again, going back to their needs, maybe their need is, again, to feel a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning, identity. Let's now talk about you, the manager, on how to balance tasks and teams and individuals. So now we're going to talk about being effective. And speaking of effective, let's bring back our good old Venn diagram. And we're trying to balance our tasks, we're trying to balance the individuals, and we're trying to balance the team. And so this boils down to a little bit of time management. And so we're going to borrow our prioritization matrix from time management. Again, another course that we have on time management, which is being such a timely topic. So you could check out our webinar, you could check out our podcast on time management, and of course, you could check out our course on time management. But here's what we want to look at. We want to look at the idea of whether it's important, urgent, and put them into a matrix. So critical activities, as you could see, falls into that idea of it's important and it's urgent. So those are the deadlines. Those are the crises. It's important and it's urgent. This has to be resolved immediately. And the reason we're talking about this, about the task, is because how are you going to find time to get what you need to get accomplished, but also to realize I need to make time for someone or for an individual or for a team, or before I quickly respond to that email or before I quickly respond to that message, just take a second to read fully what was written or listen fully to what was said. Now, when those goals are not urgent, but they're important, that's the idea of progress or opportunity. So this is where you need to be very organized as a leader and map out when are you going to make time for those goals around progress. Maybe there's something that needs to be accomplished, but maybe the deadline is not urgent and there's an opportunity. So put that in your calendar. And again, you want to do, again, borrowing from our time management, you want to do something called the FBOT, the focus block of time, that putting them into your calendar so that you don't get lost in that. And those goals around progress or opportunity, or maybe it's about, for example, giving feedback to someone on the team or coaching as an example. Those are some of the things that we want to be able to do. When it's important, when it's when it's urgent, but it's not important, is those interruptions. So it's those maintenance, it's those routine tasks. And the reason we put it that it may not be important is because you want to clarify it's urgent, but urgent for who and for when, and is there a way to maybe offer alternatives? And this is the idea of yes, no, yes, which is yes to the person, no to the idea, to getting done immediately, and offering alternatives to when it can be done. So really clarifying about the urgency of that and not being wrapped up into it. So many times we see managers that are wrapped up in the urgency of it or the emotion of the urgency of it, but not taking the time to clarify how that fits in to the goals or to the organization or to the team. And then finally, we've got our distractions, our time, our escape activities, whether that be social media, whether that be procrastination. But there's something to be said about that, which is even as a manager, you need to make time for yourself, what they call renewal time. So we had our FBOT, our focus block of time, then we have our RBOT, that you need to have a renewal block of time. Then maybe you just take 5 minutes to look out the window, to catch your breath, as they say. That's going to be so important as you do that. Because what you want to do is you want to be able to also be focused on the teams. And so let's talk a little bit about the teams. And one of the things you want to be able to do with them is to make sure that when you have meetings with the teams, that there is a mutual purpose and that there is ground rules. So that idea of the agenda is really clear, as well as that we're clear as to where we're going with this, to be, again, manage our time effectively. So when you're having the meeting, make sure that there's those mutually agreed upon ground rules and that there is that sense of purpose as we go through that. And another thing that can help meetings to move things forward so that we don't have that meeting afterwards or that meeting in the hallway is something called the degree of support. Now, we always feel that people have to say yes or no. What we want to look at here is that there's varying levels of that we could do that. So one of the things you could do in a meeting as an agreed upon ground rule is that it doesn't have to be a yes or no, so that we don't have to have a meeting about another meeting or have that meeting in the hallway, or for you to have that meeting where you're having to speak to different individuals because they felt that they were not quite agreeing with it. To say, look, you could fully agree, and then you can see on the left, or you could completely disagree. But you can also say, I partially agree, which is, I'm going to need more work before I can support this. Great, let's discuss this here and now. Or you could even say, I mostly agree, so I do support this decision. You could say, I don't agree, but you know what? This is not really important for me right now, so I'm not going to stop this from moving forward. So when people on your team know that they have this kind of empowerment to be able to say this is, again, a payoff to you getting more stuff done, because those meetings are going to be more organized with a mutually agreed purpose and ground rules and an agenda, and that people know that they can say this. And so speaking of teams, let's talk about achieving team purpose and goals, and then we're going to get into communication and giving feedback. So this is a bit of a Mad Lib, which is, what is our job as a team and what impact do we want to create in the organization and beyond? So this is from our team building course, and also from delegation, to have a sense of purpose. And this is something that's fun to do as a team, which is our team. What do we do? Who is our audience? And so what is our job as a team? Who do we work for? Or who are we providing a service to? And why are we doing this? And so what's good about this is a great exercise that you could do virtual, or you could do it in person, and people can come up with different answers. You could put them in breakout groups, and then we could look at the different answers. Another way towards getting that, we all know about SMART, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Let's add some other layers to that. And that is that we want to be able to stretch. So not just specific, but we want to have the idea of basically to be able to stretch. And to stretch means that we're going to require individuals to reach beyond the obvious boundaries. We have measurable, but then we've also got mixed, which is we could look at quantitative and qualitative objectives. So measurable, sometimes we're just looking at the quantity, but we also need to look at the quality of that. And that's one of the things that's so important is what we hear a lot from employees is, I've got so many deadlines, it feels like it's just quantity, but what about the quality of that? And so that's so important to look at that as we set goals, and that we have achievable, they should also be aligned, which is, this is a great opportunity to work together around the objectives, going back to that sense of purpose, which is so important, and meaning. And again, we looked at those feedback from those exit interviews where people felt that checking in with a sense of purpose or their growth was not always aligned. So here we go. And that there's relevance, but also that it's being reviewed, which is that there's continuous communication as we're reaching towards our goals between the employee and the manager. So we got that quality that's being looked at in there, and it's not just quantity. And a time bound, but it's also two-way. So it's mutually agreed upon, the employee and the manager. So again, twice as smart, because we've got the old school of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. But we also want to look at, as a manager, how can you be involved and how can you support towards growth and purpose? Which brings us to our final category here, which is exactly that, to develop and grow and motivate. And as we said, we've talked about setting the tone. We've talked about balancing the tasks, the team, the individuals, and helping them with their team purpose and their goals. And trust was such an important part of all this. So how do we do that? When we want to be able to influence, we need to be able to create a connection. Because when people feel connected to a purpose, to a bigger picture, they are more motivated. And when people work in a hybrid manner, which is what's going on right now, and again, people are often not clear about the expectations or of the meaning of their work and what success means for their job, and how this connects to their colleagues and to the organization and to the team. So we need to be able to, again, speak to the emotions. And part of everybody feeling so burnt out now is that because we're not making the time to connect with the people on your teams. And as we saw from those exit interviews, people 1 and 2, people are exiting. The manager could have prevented it had they taken the time to ask, how are you feeling? How are you doing? How is this working towards your sense of growth, towards your sense of purpose? All those questions can't come unless you have the trust, and unless your intention is there to pull, to involve them, to listen to them, but also to share in the vision. Where's the common ground that we're working towards? Are we going towards sharing the vision? And this is the support of the coaching part of it. Now, in the leadership style, we also had directive and delegating, and this is where this comes in, the push. Now, this is where we want to persuade, which means that we want to propose, we want to give a reasoning. This is the logic. This is, again, like I shared that 52%. This is where we share the numbers, the logic, the data behind that. And the directing, which is stating expectations and giving specific tasks. Nobody likes to feel on the spot all the time. And that's why it can't always be the coach, which is continuously asking questions. At one point, people just need to go, I just need to be clear. What is it you want me to do? How am I going to do this? What is it you're looking for? They need some direction as well. And so we put it together, you've got this balance of pull and push, which is starting with the mindset of building trust to connect and involve them and share the vision, and then to be able to give the logic to persuade by giving the reasoning, and to be able to be directive if that's what's needed. As we get into communication here, talk about listening. And one of the clients asked us the other day, and they said, they were talking about our communication skills session and going, all right, what's the outcome of this communication skills set? Because I asked them, what would success look like? And they go, well, look, you've obviously taught this class a lot. What do you see as what is the outcome for this? And I would say, it doesn't matter what we're doing. One of the biggest trends that people always say is they need to be better listeners, because listening is the gateway to collaboration, is the gateway towards trust. And there's many levels of listening, but let's just look at 3 of them. And then I'm going to ask you for an activity in just a little bit to sort of rate yourself. But level 1 is listening for the gist, which is as you're listening, you get the yeah, I get it. I got it. And then maybe you're even listening for, as soon as you hear a phrase that you can argue against or pick up on that, and you jump on that. And again, this goes into talk, as we talked earlier, about being present. You're not being fully present. You're just listening for what you want to hear, and you're missing the subtle clues and cues. And those subtle clues and cues is where we get to the next level, which is listening for the emotions that you hear. What does that other person seem to care about? What seems important to them? And what might be some of the logic that is being shared in what they are saying? And so that's really important. And the final one is to be able to listen for their point of view. And that's when you're fully present. When you've put that laptop down and you've been fully present for them. And you're now completely listening to what they're saying and trying to listen for their point of view. How do they see this? So I got a little quiz here for you. And if you want to rate your listening on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all, 10 being absolutely. So do you stop listening when you strongly disagree with the speaker on one point? 1, not at all. 10, I absolutely do stop listening when I strongly disagree. Do you assume or anticipate regarding the other person's views? So again, you're probably just listening for the gist. Do you feel that you could judge most people quite quickly before hearing them out? And so this is, again, all self-reflection. And by scoring this, you can give the logic behind maybe what you can work on. And then the final one, do you encourage others to elaborate or clarify points you have misunderstood? So if you're fully present, do you take that second to just go, you know what, I'm not quite sure I actually fully got it. And that's, again, going back to that leadership idea about adaptability and flexibility and taking ownership. This is where that comes in. And this is where, as a manager, as a leader, you stop being the boss and you start being a human being who is really curious and interested in the conversation and in your growth. So here's your homework. To practice listening. The next conversation you have, to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Did I make them feel heard? 1 to 10. 1 being, again, not at all. 10 actually, I did make them feel heard. Did I make them feel understood? And finally, did I add value, or was I being competitive? And adding value, which is, did you listen for what is maybe not being said? Did you ask for clarification? Or were you being competitive and maybe defensive, or you made it about yourself? They were sharing maybe a difficult situation and they go, oh yeah, I remember, and this happened to me. And you made it all about yourself, which ties into our idea of empathy. And as I said, listening is probably one of the biggest takeaways for so many people in training, because when they really look at it, they go, this is a gap. Empathy is probably the next one, which is, how do you become empathetic in a professional setting? And I'll show why it's so important as a leader. But empathy, very simply, is acknowledging what you're hearing that is important to the other person, what you're witnessing. You're there, you're present. And if someone is sharing an emotion, you don't have to agree with it, you don't have to share it, but you acknowledge it. So yes, you could put yourself in their other shoes, as they always say, in the other person's shoes. Most importantly, just be present, be there. What did you see? What did you hear? And why empathy is so important is that because when it comes to innovation, when people reported that their leaders were empathetic, they were able to be much more innovative. 61% said they were able to be much more innovative because, again, we saw that idea of trust which is a big part of empathy, and they could feel that they could give more of themselves. They could go to that more towards that sense of purpose. People felt more engaged. 76% of people who experienced empathy from their leaders were engaged, compared to 32% who experienced less empathy. All right, let's go to empathy theater. So I'm going to get Mel to come on board here, and we're going to do a couple of examples of empathy theater. And so what I'll be asking is, Mel is going to read the line that is right here, and then I'll ask you, webinar participants, to put in the chat Y for yes or N for no, whether I was being empathetic or not. So Mel is going to say this line, I'm going to reply, and you'll say Y or N, was I being empathetic or not? Mel, are you ready?
Ready.
All right.
All right. Yes, I delivered it late, but no one explained the new system to me.
I think we did. All right, thank you. Was I being empathetic or not? Y or N? Leslie says no. Roseanne says no. Stacy, no. Christine, no. Donna, no. All right, we're getting quite a few no's in this. Definitely not. I was giving a short answer. I wasn't fully listening. And as whether we explained it to Mel or not, doesn't matter. The whole point is that Mel is obviously feeling anxious, that they delivered it late, and no one explained the new system to me. And it was simply going, oh, that must have caused a lot of anxiety, that the new system was confusing. That's all it would have taken. Doesn't mean that they would have felt heard or listened, but at least they would have felt acknowledged. And then the temperature starts to come down. Let's do one more.
All right. I'm so frustrated with the team you put me with. It's not fair.
We are short-staffed, so that's what we had to do. Was I being empathetic or not? Again, Christine says no. Stacy, no. Leslie, no. Tibalas, no. Again, we're getting lots of no's. Absolutely. We even see the language here. Mel is actually saying the word frustrated. So yes, I may have given the logical answer, we're short-staffed, but at this point, it's an emotional thing. And this is a great opportunity to build trust. And it just simply say, I could see this has been a frustrating experience. Even just acknowledging that goes a long way towards building the trust. The most important thing about empathy is how to be authentic in that moment and to be fully present. So it doesn't matter that maybe you're not using the right words, but what matters mostly is your intention, that you're trying to be present. And you're not saying, I'm sorry, because I'm sorry means that you've distanced yourself from that. As a speaking of distance yourself from that and empathy, let's talk about feedback. And so I'll ask you again to put in here, how do you feel when it comes time to giving feedback? So type in the chat A, B, C, or D. When you think of giving feedback, do you feel cautious? Are you thinking, why don't they get it? I try. Keyword is I try to breathe. Or finally, other. So in the chat, when you think of giving feedback, how do you feel? We're getting a lot of cautious. Thank you, Roseanne and Stacy and Leslie and Jabelis. Yeah, Jody, cautious. Yeah, so everyone's going to agree cautious. And that's often because it's such a fine line between criticism, what can feel like criticism. So let's just take a few minutes here, and then we won't have time for questions, to just say that when giving feedback, if this is encouraging to you, is that 92% of employees agree that when they're recognized for a specific action, they're more likely to take that action in the future. So feedback is not always about giving difficult feedback, but to realize when we give specific, so not just that was great because when we give specific feedback, that helps people to repeat that action. They know what they're doing well. And here's some of the criteria for giving effective feedback. And we call it the 5. That the feedback was conveyed with good intentions. Again, it's all about how you approach this. So it's not about trying to change someone or correct them, but it's with intention, the idea that I want to help them grow. I want to help motivate them. I want to help them feel more effective, more productive, maybe even happier. And the timing is crucial as to when you're giving the feedback. Did they just give a presentation as an example? It didn't go well, and their emotions are high and your emotions are high. Maybe not right there, but let's set aside an hour. In an hour, let's meet again and discuss this. And the feedback is not one way, that there's a room for a dialogue in there, and that there's clarity in the message, in the feedback, and that it is helpful to the recipient. And so one way we want to do that is that we want to have a safe way to open it. So here are some examples of some safe way to open it. I have something I'd like to discuss with you that I think will help us work together more effectively. I think we have different perceptions about, and I'd like to hear your thinking about this. And then finally, I'd like to see if we might reach a better understanding about, and I really want to hear your feelings about this and share my perspective as well. And so here's some safe ways to open your feedback. Take a screenshot of this if you want. And again, this is part of our course about giving feedback. Great conversation means giving feedback. And so here we go. This brings us to a close. We're going to take questions, and we'll just talk a little bit more about the course. But what we want to do definitely is that leadership is setting the tone. Where's that fine line between I'm being the boss and I'm being the leader? And how do I effectively balance my tasks, my team, and individuals by looking at what's important and urgent? And that also I've made time for myself, but I've also made time for the individual and for the teams, and I've given them a sense of purpose. And I'm able to achieve that by, again, looking at those goals. That was not just smart, but how we could stretch it and how we could be involved and working towards that sense of purpose. And that all ties in with the idea of developing them, how I can grow and motivate them, and giving feedback that starts with a safe way to open. And the idea really here is that what makes a leader is that idea of trust, that balance of authority and presence and the impact that you have. So as you're thinking of your questions, let me just tell you also, we have some upcoming webinars coming up. So we're going to do something from our great series, which is Be a Great Presenter with Microsoft PowerPoint and presentation skills. So we're combining the technical and the soft skill side of giving a presentation. How do you do a great PowerPoint and how do you present it? The features using Microsoft 365. And then in June, we're talking about change, how to turn resistance into resilience. And let me take you now to our website and just share with you, take you on a little tour of this. And as you can see here, we've got our courses, as you can see right here. And then in our courses, we would go to our leadership. And then in our leadership skills, we have right here the course that we were just talking about, which is Be a Leader, Not a Boss, Managing in the Modern Workplace. So if you want to go more in depth and practice more, we could do private training, and we've also got some public classes, and you could see some of the dates come in here as well. We also talked about time management. And so we've got 2 time managements. We've got our full course, Take the Stress Out of Great Time Management. And then we've got our sort of lunch and learn, our hour-and-a-half virtual course, Take Your Time Back with Great Time Management Workshop. And you can see we've got some public dates for that, but we can also do this privately. And then we also talked about emotional intelligence, the path to professional success. So those are some of the skills that are in there in your that we talked about today. And we also talked about leadership skills. So in the leadership skills, I want to talk to you also about the packages that we have. So if you want to go on more of a learning path with your leadership, we put together a great packages here, which is that one, you've got a welcome webinar. It's an opportunity to network with other managers. What we see a lot of is managers always say, I feel alone. So to network with other managers, but there's also coaching support throughout the series. And there's also one-on-one coaching afterwards to check in. And we've got different packages that you could do. So leading with trust, how to lead strong teams, executive presence, effective presentation. And so if we look at leading strong teams as an example, kind of comes in with the theme today, you'll see that there's some required courses that you would take as part of that package. And again, there's some coaching support throughout. And then you can add one to make it as an elective. And this makes it part of your leadership journey. And then finally, we've got all of our free resources as well. And so if you enjoyed this webinar, you can check out our other webinars. Like I said, we have a webinar on time management, webinar on emotional intelligence. Do check out our podcast. This guy looks familiar. In fact, I think I'm wearing the exact same outfit in the avatar there. And that's our podcast called the Great Canadian Leadership Podcast. And you can, we speak with many leaders. We also share our own insights on what makes a great leader and their communication style. So that being said, we've got a few minutes here. Let's take some of your questions. And thank you everyone, by the way, for jumping in with some of your participation today. So I really appreciate that as well, and thank you all for as well for coming in to the webinar today. Mel, I see you got one here that came in. Okay, what's one or two things as a new manager I should focus on? Absolutely. Well, you know, I can't stress this enough. It keeps coming back to the idea of building the trust with the people, because when you build that trust and number one, I think is to be fully present. So how you respond, how you react to the people on your teams has a huge effect. And because this has a ripple effect, you know, if you connect with that one person, again, they'll speak really highly about you as a manager. This will also give you more ability to be more focused on your time. So when I feel like heavy lifting, like, oh, I got to coach this person, or I got to give them feedback, or I got to reply to them. But again, when it takes up less time to be able to do that than it does to have to maybe replace that person because they felt unsatisfied. So great question. Thank you. And yes, another one. Thank you, Mel, about the leadership styles. So the leadership styles, we had directive, we had coach, we had supportive, we had the delegator, and sometimes one person is just like that. So again, that shoe store manager was just directive. There was no support, there was no delegation, there was no coaching. That's for sure. It's a combination of all of them that you're able to, again, tell. You're able to ask, and you're able to support, and you're able to delegate. So tell is that directive, ask is that coach, support is that, again, exactly what that means. And then to delegate, to give people responsibilities. People want responsibilities, and it helps them go towards the goals of ownership. So it is a combination of all those, of being directive and supportive. All right. And I see we're getting close to the time. So I'll just check in if there's any other questions. Great questions. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Leslie. I'm glad to see that this was informative. Thank you, Chibialas. Christine, thank you very much. All right, Mel, it looks like there's no more questions as people are. Jody says, thank you, very motivating. That's great. I'm glad to hear that, Jody.
Yep, and you will get the replay, Roseanne. But thank you, Joel. That was really good. And thank you everybody for coming. And this will be up on YouTube, and we will be sending you an email with the replay and with some of the resources that Joel mentioned there. So thank you so much again for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mel, for producing the webinar. And yes, please enjoy it on YouTube, and we look forward to hearing from you.
All right. We'll go ahead and shut down.
All right. Thank you, Mel.
Thanks.